Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to our I believe it's our fourth webinar, produced by Cathedral District-Jax on Cathedral Hill. This one is about adaptive reuse. And for just a few of you who might be new to who the Cathedral District is, I'd like to tell you just for a second about what we do. CDJ, as we go by, is a 7-year-old nonprofit that is directed by 18 independent board of directors. And we are all about the business of redeveloping the northeast quadrant of downtown Jacksonville. It's about 118 acres, about 36 blocks. And it's in the northern part of it is on State Street, and the southern part of the boundary is on Adams. The eastern boundary is Hogan's Creek, which is under redevelopment. And then the western boundary is Main Street. So it's not exactly a square because of Hogan's Creek, but it is about the size, if you look at it on the map, but the site looks like a piano. So of the 118 acres, about 50% of those acres are surface parking lots. So at one time it was a thriving neighborhood of residential, and that's what we're trying to reinvigorate. I want to thank our sponsors, as you can see them on the screen right now. These sponsors make us capable of producing these and other things. I won't go through naming all of them, but I just want to point out just a couple here that JWB and Kasper and Zyscovich, which is with us today. We even picked up the JEA, Baker Design Build, which is one of our board members, Tamara Baker. So we have broad support from around the community. These sponsors on this slide are only the ones that are participating in this particular show. We have others that are sponsors that look at our bigger, broader picture, such as the Jaguars, who have been very generous to us, and also the DuPont Foundation, which has been very generous to us. At the end of our little chit chat here today, we're going to allow some questions. So if you feel the urge to correct us, or if you feel the urge to chime in, give me a question off to the side. And near the end, when we have 5 or 10 minutes, we'll pick some of those up for a conversation. So for right now, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have 3 really fabulous people that have agreed to do this with us. And the first I'm going to talk about is Becky Morgan. Becky is a registered interior designer in Florida, and she has studied interior design at the Art Institute and for a while was the adjunct professor there. She is currently the commercial market director at Zyscovich architectural firm here in Jacksonville. You may know this firm because they started in Miami. They're pretty big in South Florida. And about 2 years ago, they ventured off into North Florida. So I'm anxious to hear what Becky has to say about South Florida and North Florida. Becky has worked on several adaptive reuse projects, a lot of them in Springfield, which I think is your neighborhood. I'm not sure about that. She's done Crispin's, which was formerly a 1930 department store, Main and Six Brewing Company, Brewster Hospital, which is now the home headquarters of the Florida Land Trust. She's done work on the Phoenix Art District, which recently you may have read in the paper just picked up $5.5 million of incentives from the city. And then Trinity Baptist Church Sanctuary, which extended their preschool. And next I have Erik Kasper, who is a dear friend, but not only that, he is a new constituent in the Cathedral District, which we're going to talk about a little bit today. Erik received his bachelor's in art and his master's in architecture from the University of Florida. He is the founding member of the Kasper Architectural firm, which is a full-service architectural and interior design firm. Some of the work that Erik has done is pretty broad in scope, but we're going to talk about some of those today and show you some slides. But he's worked on educational, office buildings, healthcare, and cultural spaces. But this is the part about Erik that I just love. Erik is most proud of the fact that he balances his work-life balance stuff, and he only works 4 days a week because he designates 1 day a week to contribute time to 26 local partners. Now, someday I want to see that list. Then there's Tom Hurst, and I'm so glad that Tom could join us. We did a mad scramble this morning because Tom agreed to join us on the panel today. Tom has his bachelor's of architecture and a BA in science from Kent State University, the School of Architecture there. He's a licensed architect in 10 states. He's worked for over 30 years in this profession, and his focus is on adaptive reuse. He's the principal in the 14-year-old Dasher Hurst architectural firm. And he is what I would call an ardent student and probably practitioner of downtown Jacksonville. Tom's portfolio includes the Union Terminal Warehouse, adaptive reuse of the Independent Life Building, the Laura Trio, the Barnett Bank renovation, and Farah building, which is beautiful. If you've been inside that, it's just beautiful. So we're going to talk about some of these projects today and show you a couple of slides and hope that this will generate some lively discussion amongst our three professionals. So adaptive reuse is a funny kind of term. It's tossed around a lot. It actually stems from the glut of the housing demand and the glut from commercial buildings. Back in the early 2009, when interest rates were real low, there was a no talk about adaptive reuse. It's all been within the last few years. And that's because what I call the interest rates are now going higher for longer. So it prevents a lot of development from happening. Even with last week's kind of semi-bright announcement that the interest rates might be dropping a little bit, we still have a glut of buildings, particularly a glut of commercial buildings that a lot of people want to turn into residential. ULI has written a lot about this, the Urban Land Institute, which I'm very familiar with. And also even 60 Minutes did a piece on adaptive reuse of commercial buildings, which I thought was really interesting. So during the pandemic, a lot of people went home to work and they didn't come back. And you ended up with a giant ghost town. And if you've seen a before and after of Manhattan, you really appreciate how that happened. So let's turn it over to our panelists here and let's see if I could toss you a couple of softballs at the beginning. In your experiences, Florida, particularly North Florida, in the game of adaptive reuse, or are we behind the curve? Anybody, just jump in there.
Erik, why don't you start us off?
Well, I know you're going to wrap up because you've got some good projects going downtown. So, I mean, my experience and what I'm seeing, it seems like we are behind. It seems like we've had cheap land and we had area to grow and sprawl, and you tend to just follow the money where the projects are easier to finance and easier to make happen. So I think we're behind the curve, but there are good things happening. Downtown Jacksonville is growing. And so this is now the opportunity to take advantage of those buildings that are in existing infrastructure. We don't have to deal with retention ponds. We don't have to deal with new roads. We don't have to deal with new utilities. The building's already there. So I think we're behind, but I definitely see that we're going to be picking up and have a lot of good projects on the horizon.
All right. Becky?
Yes, I would agree. I think there's a lot of rich opportunity in downtown Jacksonville. In addition to Erik's comment about sprawl, we are a huge city, the largest city. And so we have these sort of city centers throughout where a lot of cities you find that downtown is their city center. And so those areas are being reused and highly populated. I think it's looking forward to seeing that changing. But as of now, I do think that North Florida is a little behind the curve.
Tom, you've done a lot of work downtown. Where do you think we are in the spectrum?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to agree with the other two that we are a little bit behind the curve. As Erik said, it's always been a lot easier in Jacksonville with the plentiful available land in the suburbs. It's easier to build on a green site than it is downtown. There's a lot of challenges with downtown, logistically, financially, just the sheer cost of renovating some of these buildings. But I've sat and seen other sister cities, Nashville, Denver, even Greenville, South Carolina, reinvigorate their downtown through adaptive reuse and new development. And I'm dreaming of the day that Jacksonville can kind of get caught back up and get to where I thought it would be when I moved here 24 years ago, frankly. But I do think there's a lot of momentum. There's a lot more support from the administration, the last two administrations, I'd say, for downtown redevelopment. So I think the future is bright and it's looking much better.
Wow, optimism. I like optimism. That's good. So one of the largest Jacksonville adaptive reuse projects is the Union Terminal Building, Tom, which I believe you're the architect on.
Correct.
And for those of you who don't know, it's located just north of the Cathedral District. And it's at the foot of, I believe it's the Matthews Bridge. Isn't that right, Tom?
That's right. Yeah.
Were you going to correct me? Did I say something that wasn't true?
No, you're spot
Okay,
on.
I'm on a roll. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
This building, and I say this is one of the largest because it's only 330,000 square feet. I mean, it's a big whopper.
It is.
And it's being turned into apartments, office space, food and beverage, some artist lofts. And it's about a $72 million project. So Tom, could you talk about it just a little bit about how this happened? I know that the original owners of the building lost it when the downturn came, and then somebody else came along behind it with these clever ideas. And maybe you could tell us what hurdles you had to surmount in order to make
Sure.
this happen.
Well, as you mentioned, it's a gigantic building. I think most of you have driven past it on the Matthews Bridge going to and from Arlington from downtown, and probably driven past it a million times and didn't give it a whole lot of thought. But this was a building built in the 1920s, about 100 years ago, by Turner Construction to be a large produce warehouse. And it has docks that have access to the creek as well as rail lines. So it was a large structure. Unfortunately, for the past 30 years, it's not that it was vacant, but it was largely underused, undercared for, and it deteriorated pretty greatly. So we were fortunate. Our client, Columbia Ventures from Atlanta, bought this building about 5 years ago and had a vision to adapt it and build it out as a residential hub of that community. But importantly, and I think this is really key, is they didn't want to lose the character that was already in the building. There were a lot of artists and craftsmen and artisans in the building who made it their home and have worked out of that building for 20, 30 years, and they wanted to maintain that. So the building is very unique in that the upper floors are all developed as residential apartments with over 220 apartments, but then the ground floor and the basement is maintained as commercial space and kind of craftsman workspace. So it really is a true live work opportunity. And although the size of the building can be a hurdle because it is so large and so expensive to renovate a building of this size, it's also kind of a virtue because you are able to get over 220 units and 45,000 square feet of commercial space. You have a return on investment built into this building that, some of the smaller projects that we and others have investigated in town, they don't work because they just don't have that return on investment. That's really not the case with this project. That is what is a hurdle is also a virtue in this case.
That's so interesting. I didn't have any idea that there were already artists working and living there. That's news to me. That this particular project is very close to the Armory, which is also in the process of being changed.
That's right.
As a matter of fact, I'm not sure in that one slide, the aerial slide, if it wasn't the brick building just off to the right. I'm not sure of that, but both of these buildings and this particular project is really north of the core of downtown.
Right.
And all buildings of this size, particularly something of this magnitude, requires substantial government subsidies.
Right.
And not only is that a challenge in its own right to get through those hurdles, so to speak, to get to the government subsidy to fill the gaps, but how important is it that people on your team understand how you access those government funds, and how difficult are they to get?
Yeah. So you're right. The projects like this rely on government incentives in many different forms, whether it's grants, tax abatements, historic tax credits, which were critical to this project. They all play a role. These projects are big and they require many different funding sources to be cobbled together to make them work. And every one of them is important, and without them, they don't pencil out. So in this case, we did help the owner apply for and receive approval from the National Park Service for their historic tax credits, which is a great program where they help to incentivize and give you a 20% tax credit on the historic rehabilitation work that you do on the project. These types of incentives are critically important for projects like this. And it takes, you know, in a case like this, it took 3 years roughly to put all the documentation and to put all the pieces and get all the ducks in a row from a financial perspective to make the project work. And that's not at all uncommon.
Yeah, I have found that one of the biggest shortcomings of the general public on any kind of redevelopment downtown is the length of time it takes for this to happen. And part of it is when you're in a partnership with the government to fill your gaps like that, you have to be patient. And with CDJ, what we say is that we're fact-based because we have a master development plan and that we're strategic. So we know where the commercial should go, where the residential should land. And then we're patient. And that has been the hardest thing for people to understand, people on our board and people in the general public that I speak to. So, Becky, I'd like to go to you for a second and talk just a little bit about the eyes of the architects and the developers, and what are the impediments to adaptive reuse for kind of projects of this landmark size or this historic importance. And you have some slides that you shared with us about some projects that you've worked on that I'd like you to share with us, and then maybe share how difficult they are or how easy they were, depending on the size, because they're not the same scope as what Tom was dealing with the terminal.
Yeah, I would say that they're not the same scope and definitely not the same scale. I'm not working on the size of projects that they are over at Dasher Hurst. And as an interior designer, the bulk of the work that I'm doing is really redefining the interiors to suit the need other than what the building was built for, and navigating those code challenges and you know, making sure it works for the owner and then also works for you know, for the permitting and life safety and everything. So this
I really, excuse me just a second, I really love this juxtaposition between what it was before and what it is now. It's so hip and cool.
So I did a lot of work in Springfield. I was a resident of Springfield for 10 years. I'm now actually in Arlington. But I was really proud of the work that I was doing there. And I did a lot of things that are probably beyond the scope of an architect or interior designer because I lived there. I was looking at, you know, pairing these buildings with what it could potentially be, and then finding partners for that wanted to fill that spot. You know, when you're looking at things and you're like, what could this be? And it's like, well, it could really be anything to an extent. But as we spoke about earlier, that starts running into cost implications and does it really make sense to do that? And so part of the process was just looking at what's the low hanging fruit and what could this potentially become through just a really renovation and restoring a lot of the natural character and beauty of the original building. So this was a department store in the 1930s. It was a flag department store. It was Jacksonville based. I believe they also had a location downtown. And so over the years, the 80s and 90s, this was actually just a pawn shop. And so the owner, John Christen, the building, and we got to work right away turning this into a restaurant. It has a beautiful mezzanine inside with the original railing and stair. We were required to add an additional stair for egress. And then basically it was restoring the storefront. All of that beautiful metalwork had been painted over. We had to build a kitchen in there. The orientation of the building is pretty long and narrow. There's a huge bar in there. It's the longest bar I've ever designed. But it's really about working with the architecture and the parameters that you're given. This project also received federal tax credits. I worked with them and the national government to make sure that we were doing things by the guidelines. It's a financial benefit to clients when they're able to do that. It helps. So it helps. It's a piece of the puzzle, like Tom said. This one here was traditionally built as a dentist office, and the last use previous to this had been retail. And so when you get into restaurants, and this one here is actually a brewery, you've got a lot of equipment and a lot of new requirements coming in. So there's a lot of trenching and tearing up the floor and just building a lot of infrastructure that wouldn't have existed for the previous use. And you want to balance that with maintaining the building as well. So this was a successful project. I think another brewery has since purchased this and still enjoy the infrastructure that was put in there. And this is directly across the street from Christie's. So at one point I was working on two right across the street from each other, which made it pretty easy to keep up with clients.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is, yeah, these are a couple of the things that I worked on. I also did a lot of residential projects, and you know, with the tax credits, as long as it is revenue generating, even if it's a residential property, you're able to take advantage of those as long as you follow the guidelines.
So many times in more than 2 or 3 stories, maybe 30 stories or more, you end up with these huge floor plates in these tall buildings. And there's some thought that that was a mistake in America. We shouldn't be doing those kind of 30-story buildings, that there's only 1 or 2 cities in America that can really handle that kind of density, New York, maybe in LA, but that trying to convert those buildings that are, I think the Bank of America is 44 stories tall. Trying to convert them, the floor plate is what kind of drives everything, because it's all massive, and looking for sunlight down into the middle so that you could chop it up into livable units. Can you talk just a little bit about what that problem is, and if you've had any experience or had professionals that are associated with you have had some experience doing that?
Tom, didn't you have your Independent Life? That's an office building that's being converted to residential.
Yeah, I mean, this problem that Ginny's articulating, we've run into quite a bit. The Union Terminal warehouse was indicative of it. It's, you know, those floor plates are gigantic, and if you stand in the middle of the building, you're 100 feet from the windows. So we, you know, through some creative planning, we were able to find a way to get some daylight back into those spaces. We do have the added benefit of they have a lot of glass on the perimeter, which is great. In spaces, we borrow light through the living room into some of the bedrooms to get daylight back into the heart of the building. You're right, some of the downtown buildings, the Independent Life building was another one where, yeah, they were designed for office space. They're not really designed for commercial, or I'm sorry, for residential. So converting them can be really challenging. Sometimes we end up putting kind of amenity space. Maybe it's a meeting room or a golf simulator room. We've even done it in some of these buildings, kind of in the heart where you can't get daylight to it. You find other uses that become amenities for the residents of the building that are not necessarily residential in nature. But yeah,
I want to add to that. I saw
creative.
a lecture with Cooper Carey, and they put storage units, and they were renting the storage units at a higher dollar per square foot than the actual apartment.
Yeah, that's
they were hidden from the public.
No,
well, you know, downtown residents need storage too.
Yeah,
It
you'd
was
rent an
for the
apartment
tenants.
and you would rent a storage unit.
Yeah,
Wow.
we've put pet grooming stations and things of that nature in those spaces too, because, you know, just you try to find a use that doesn't need windows necessarily to fill those interior spaces, so that you can reserve those perimeter spaces for the bedrooms and living rooms.
Yeah. In Jacksonville, some of the larger buildings are changing hands. The Wells Fargo building, for instance, has changed hands. And in some instances, the new thought is, and I have to agree with this, that taking a look at these tall buildings that we have not heretofore been pressuring to put commercial on the first floor and restaurants on the first floor, that seems to be an idea that's percolating. You want to talk about that just a little bit with what your thinking is about trying to put that downtown, or is there enough critical mass of dwelling units with people in them to be able to support that kind of retail?
Well, we're actually working in the Wells Fargo building with the Banyan Capital, the new recent owner, and Alex Focus actually from JWB is trying to promote more street front commercial and residential restaurant, and he's focusing on Laura Street, kind of focus on the Laura Street corridor. And so you have the Wells Fargo building and the Bank of America tower. I don't know if you were able to put the images up here, but we do have a scheme where the Wells Fargo can add some restaurants and retail to Laura Street, and that also turns the corner and has a view of the old landing. So we're hoping that works, and I do believe That's what the downtown needs. It needs that walkable. It's, the residential is going to follow and then the retail is going to follow. But if we can take these buildings that were traditionally built as offices and we're all internally focused, walk in the front door and go in the lobby and then go up. They still have that function, but then take advantage of that ground floor, which no longer needs to be a large bank teller or something, and make it open to the street. Alex believes, and I think the numbers are there, that you can increase the rent for your upper floor tenants when you activate your ground floor and make your building a more vibrant and active building. So it's kind of like a double benefit.
Yeah, it is a chicken and egg story, whether you can support small businesses such as a dry cleaner or a nail shop. And you can't do it until you've got enough people living in the neighborhood.
That's right.
Unless you're doing commercial in there, such as an architecture and engineering firm that you would put in. Then you've got people coming to work every day. That is commercial also.
Yeah.
So we deal with this all the time in the Cathedral District. Our goal in the district is to build about 2,500 new residential units. We're on a pretty good track to do that. In the 7 years that we've been around, we have about 690 right now that are either in finished or in construction or in financing. The largest of which are two very large projects, which are 3 city blocks, and then one is a whole city block, and that could probably hold about 350 units. So the critical mass of residents is the most critical piece of the puzzle. And until we get that many people, enough people, if we are successful in the next few years of putting in 2,500 units, we'll have about 5,000 people in the district. That is the size of San Marco, the size of Riverside, the size of Springfield. So you can generate enough capital then to be able to support these smaller businesses. It's a real tricky part. So I love the idea of putting commercial on the first floor, which is now a mandate of the DIA, the Downtown Investment Authority, that the first floor has to be commercial. But how do you support that commercial? I don't know. For instance, I think, Tom, you did the ViStar parking garage, didn't you?
We did, and I give ViStar all the credit in the world. They're a great client on that project. It's not an adaptive reuse in the context of this discussion today, but I give them credit because they were insistent on maximizing retail storefront on Laura, on Main, and on Forsyth Street. And not only that, they supported the introduction of the Jacksonville Children's Chorus into the space on Main Street, which, as we've all keep saying, it activates the street front. It gives you something to look in, and while you walk down the street, you're not walking past empty storefronts and parking garages. And the more that we can all collectively do this all throughout downtown, the more walkable it's going to become, the more attractive it is for people to linger and spend time in the restaurants and the other businesses that are there. And you're right. I think ULI uses a number of 10,000 rooftops as kind of the goal for kind of a vibrant urban mixed use neighborhood. And I sincerely hope Jacksonville gets there. Once you do that, like you said, the businesses become self-supporting and they don't need city incentives for the dry cleaner and the nail salon and the restaurant. They go in because it's good business.
Yeah. The number for many years has been 10,000 in Jacksonville. We have 10,000 residents. We're going to be okay. We're going to be golden. We're at 8,000 right now, a little over 8, I believe, the last time I looked at those numbers, maybe 8,200 or 8,500. So we're close, but there's still big gaps because of what Becky pointed out. We're just spread out.
Yeah.
So we're trying to learn from those lessons in the Cathedral District, and our master development plan, which is on our website, says to start in the middle and then work out so that you have a concentration in a certain area, which we are doing. Right now, there are 120 units that are under construction, and the old YWCA that will be open probably the end of August. So they have underground parking and then they have surface parking. Last spring, another 120 units were opened with all underground parking. For 240, and the ones that will be open the end of this summer will have children in them. So we're looking for things for them to do on the street. We know that we're going to have more feet on the street, but it's very, very difficult to try and make that all happen so that it comes out together. It's not going to come out together, but it's going to be close. It's going to be close. Erik, you made a really bold decision to put your headquarters downtown, and it lovely in the Cathedral District that you chose this building. So I want you to talk a little bit about your building. I love these pictures.
Yeah, and I moved to Jacksonville in the 3rd grade, so I've been here for many years. I came back home in late 90s, and my dad said Springfield is the place to be, and it's still taken a little bit while to get to where it is, but I believe that Jacksonville is really close. I think Shah Khan's doing a lot of great stuff in the sports district. I think some outside developers and even corner lot local developers and JWB are doing a great job. So with our activity, and we're not doing as much work downtown as Dasher Hurst is, but we are, working with the Jaguars and some other stuff downtown. So yes, we thought we would plant a flag downtown. So we looked around and found this building. And I think what's great about all these discussions is that, you never know what it's like to be a parent until you have kids, and so you never know what it's like to do an adaptive reuse until you actually do it. And so I'm sobered by the challenges. I'm sobered by the cost. So anyway, so yes, we found this building. It's been sitting there for a few years. It's just a simple 2-story, 25,000 square feet total concrete block. The picture on the bottom right was how it was, and the top right when we found it. And I think it had sit vacant for a decade or so, and then another gentleman purchased it and kind of gutted it. But I think that also shows that it's not easy. Maybe he purchased it and thought he was going to do it and kind of just threw in the flag, and so we picked up the ball and ran with it. And so the pictures in the middle are the renderings of what the exterior is going to look like. We made a decision to do full brick veneer on the exterior, which I'm a professional and this is what I do for a living, and I should know how much things cost, but I'm just flabbergasted. But it's going to be awesome. The picture of the bottom middle is the current progress, and then top left is current progress. So again, being downtown, I think, is important. Being where city government is, where corporate headquarters are, where the things are happening in the city, I think is important. So we chose that. Selfishly, I'm an empty nester. We moved to San Marcos, so it's a 6-minute drive for me to get to work. So that's good as well. But a lot of lessons learned here of getting through city permitting. Again, I'm a professional, and this should be easy, and it was not easy. And I do think that city could do a better job in making the permitting a bit more streamlined. And I was disappointed in the timing that took. I will say that DIA was very helpful. We did get the retail facade grant pretty quickly, so that was helpful. So I guess where we are.
So
We're excited, but it's been tough.
Yeah, well, we're thrilled. We love that picture in the middle on the top, and we've used it in talks that we've given about what's coming to the district. And to me, this is an example of bringing commercial into the Cathedral District that will work. It doesn't require residential to make it work. The people who work there will be coming into the district.
Right.
So the most frequent question or discussion that I encounter is parking. And you have metered parking out in front and down one side, but you've got a JEA parking lot immediately adjacent to you to the west, which I'd love to help you try to get a few spaces out of that, because they're clearly not using it now since they've relocated down to the west side of downtown. So the parking issue is very keen for residential also, because in the Cathedral District, we have this most unique topo that we have a 10-foot drop off from the top of the highest point in the city, which was formerly called Billy Goat hill.
Mhm.
And all four sides, a 10-foot drop off is the height of a garage. So the two projects, one that's finished and one that's under construction right now, one that will be under construction soon, are all looking at underground parking, which solves that parking problem. If you talk to Alex Zafakis, he says, who cares about the parking? Let him park on the street. I mean, that's what urban living is all about. So he's much more cavalier about that parking question than a lot of people are. But sometimes the banker says to you, well, where are people going to park? And they dictate a lot of that, how many parking places you need for how many people are in the building. I'd like to turn now to the three of you to talk a little bit about the hot button that's right now in front of City Council, and that's the Laura Street Trio. And Tom, I think you've done some work on this also, but it is a project that is clearly the backbone of downtown. It's at the epicenter of downtown, and yet we just can't seem to get it going. And
Yeah.
part of it is there's 2 or 3 schools of thought on this, that there's just not enough equity in the private sector in the project to make it lift, to take off. And then the question is, there's plenty of people outside of Jacksonville who might be able to bring enough equity to this kind of a project. Why haven't they done it? So right now, I believe it's something like 85 million that they're looking for from the city, and the DIA has essentially washed their hands of it and turned it over to City Council. Now that's a real Donnybrook, I'll tell you. So trying to have 19 people decide how they're going to negotiate an incentive on that project is pretty crazy in my book. But I'd like you all to weigh in on the history of this particularly important project, and maybe give us some suggestions that you think might be things that we haven't thought of.
Yes, all of the above is true.
Yeah.
Yes, I've been working on this project for 20 years now, believe it or
Oh
not.
my gosh.
I started working with Cameron Kuhn in 2004 on concepts for this building when I was shortly after Erik left Rink Design. I was at Rink Design at the time working on it, and have been working steadfastly for literally 20 years, 10 of which with the current developer, trying to make it work. It's enormously complicated. It's 3 historic buildings that are irreplaceable for the city. These are buildings designed by Henry Clutho. I think most of you are familiar with, a landmark architect who was responsible for some of the biggest landmark projects after the Great Fire 100 years ago. So, the thought of tearing them down is just, misguided, in my opinion. We have to find a way to make it work. I know the numbers are daunting. I know it's challenging. Restoring these buildings is inherently very, very expensive. One of the ways we've tried to work around it is by, similar to what I said on the Union Terminal, by increasing the density of what we're building. If there's a fixed cost on the restoration side of things, how do you offset that? Well, you offset it by increasing your revenue on the other side. So the new addition, the hotel, the multifamily additions that are planned to be built, we added more stories to it, added more apartment units, added more density, which in the end is going to benefit the city as well, but it helps to make the numbers work as well. I'm not an expert on the financing. I leave that up to my client, who is, obviously he's much more the expert on that than I am. So how he packages it all together and presents it, and what kind of incentives he can, apply to from the city, it's outside of my area of expertise. But we did help him go through the historic Part 2 tax credit approval process, and we were successful in that. So, at this point, it's a labor of love. I'm going to continue to stick with it and hope to help him work it out. If it's not now, honestly, this developer is very, very motivated. He's a local guy. His heart is in the right place. He wants to make this work as much as anybody. If he doesn't do it, frankly, I can't imagine another developer stepping in and doing it. It's just too daunting.
Do you have a sense of what the construction costs changed from late 2018 to 2024?
Yeah. Well, anybody in the business knows we've seen 15% annual increases since COVID till now. So if you compound that over 5 years, a project, any given project, doesn't matter what it is, costs almost twice as much today as it did in 2018. That's the facts.
Yeah.
And compound that with high interest rates on any financing. Adaptive reuse, just like new construction, requires financing, and these days it's at 7% or thereabout. So it's challenging. It's really hard to make these deals work, and they have all the different buckets that they pull from to make it work, but it's still very, very challenging.
Mm. I noticed that the first committee meeting from the city council has already, I think they met yesterday for the first time. And there's a great deal of discussion about taking them down, which
Yeah.
I agree with you, Tom, that would be a bad idea. But on the other hand, trying to make it work financially is the key to everything. The old adage about follow the money.
Sure.
So unless you've got some substantial money behind you, some national money behind you, I don't know that this project is salvageable, to tell you the truth. Do you all remember the Chop House and the story behind the Chop House on the corner of Main Street and Bay? And
Yes.
prior, the owner refused to do anything, refused to salvage it. It was imploding on itself, this magnificent old building. And what the city did was come in and condemn it and take it, and then put it up for sale and gave it away very reasonably. And look what it is today. So that means when I say follow the money, that could very well be, that could be the salvation for these three buildings, something along this, pretty drastic.
Yeah. Well, I can appreciate, we all want our city councilmen to be financially responsible, fiscally responsible on the city's behalf. They have to vet these deals and challenge the developer on them. They're, handing over $80 million. Nobody should be doing that, without careful consideration. All I can say is I hope they find a way to meet in the middle and make it work. I think it's too important for the city. I think these are catalytic projects in the heart of downtown, right on Laura Street, which is, it's our main street, essentially. We have to make this work.
Tom, you also did I think it's the Bank of America Tower across the street. Why
Barnett
do you
building.
think, I'm sorry, the Barnett building. Why do you think that project was successful and was able to get financing and stuff versus this one?
I can't speak to the finances, but it was the financing and ground was broken for that project in 2017. It was a different financial environment. I want to say the final cost of that was around the low 30s, $30 million ish. Very, very proud of the project. It was maybe less challenging than the Laura Trio in that it was in better shape. It didn't require as much rehabilitation and structural remediation as what the Laura Trio will require. And there's virtually no new construction on this. It was all facade restoration and interior construction. So
yeah, it seems like there's more square footage on the Barnett.
Thank you for bringing that up. It's a lot more square footage.
Yeah.
The Laura Trio buildings, part of what makes them beautiful is their proportions of these very slender, tall buildings with lots and lots of daylight and windows. But that also leads to a very small ratio of square footage and floor area to skin on those buildings. So that just drives the cost up. And the Barnett was the opposite. Barnett has a lot of floor area to skin. So all of those things compounded, and like I said, the timing probably more than anything, just to make it work.
I've been all through that building with the developer, and it is stunningly beautiful. And it is a mix of penthouses on the top, some
Right.
affordable housing in the middle, and then commercial where Chase bank is in the lobby, which was really clever, I thought, to replace a bank with a bank.
Sure.
But it was just absolutely beautifully done. And I think that the Laura Street trio could be the same way if it had been done 15 years ago back in,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I don't know, we missed the mark. We somehow missed the mark on that. So let me ask you guys just a couple of things that have come in with our questions, that there seems to be a lack of coordination in the city of Jacksonville's part between the permitting people and the permitting department and their sense of, lack of sense of urgency. Let me just put it that way. And what what a developer needs to have happen right away. And Erik, you alluded to this earlier just on your building in the Cathedral District, but the planning department and the new mayor may have heard this when they did their listening all over the community about how this just isn't working between the firms that want to come here that want to do something and do development work downtown, and then how you get through all that quagmire of the city bureaucracy. Anybody would weigh in on that?
I'll jump in. I was asked to be part of Mayor Deegan's permitting committee, and we had engineers and contractors in town, and we met and we came up with a handful of lists and suggestions of how planning department we felt could do better and building department we felt could do better. We brought examples from other cities of what they're doing, and we presented these. Some of them were some permitting checklists, expedited permitting where we actually go into one room and lock everybody in the room, and in 2 hours you mark up the drawings and you walk out with a permit. Texas is doing that successfully. And moving a couple departments over on the engineering side, on the civil side, as to who reviews things. So we had a handful of suggestions, which I was hopeful and thought would be promising. Unfortunately, I think where we are now is they decided to hire more staff.
Oh.
And so in my opinion, you're taking something that is not quite perfect, and then you're just putting more people behind it. Now, sure, staff is going to help things go faster because we got more people working on it. But you're still working on a slow process, in my opinion.
Yeah. The criticism of the DIA recently is pretty profound. And you think about staffing, they're woefully understaffed at the Downtown Investment Authority. They have 81 last time, and we monitor their meetings pretty consecutively. And with 81 projects that they're working on, they really have less than 10 people who are monitoring that themselves and trying to negotiate some of that. And the larger ones quite often are taken out of their hands and dealt with in the mayor's office. So the idea of streamlining is comes back to the old bugaboo about Jacksonville, which I have heard time and time again. I do something called a little windshield tour of the Cathedral District for developers that are from out of town. They'll write to us, or they'll call and they'll say, tell me what's happening, what's available. And I said, would you like to get in my old Volvo and I'll show you? And these are the things that are not public record yet, that are in the process of being developed. And they look at the sites and they think, oh, this is fantastic. And here's the but that always comes, that Jacksonville is very hard to do business in. Very, very hard to do business in. And I don't know, they never really pin that down as to whether it's just a handful of few that are already doing business here, and it's hard to break into that, or whether it's the permitting piece that is so difficult, or whether it's government in general that's difficult. But it's a consistent criticism of business people trying from New York and from LA and from Chicago, who I've driven in my little old Volvo around the Cathedral District. That it's consistent. I don't think they're talking to each other before they come to see me, but can you comment on that? Have you heard that story that it's hard to do business in Northeast Florida and Jacksonville?
I've definitely heard that story. And I think that it really is just because when it comes to development, especially of new construction, high-rise, mixed use, and even really adaptive reuse, we're kind of newer to it. And so it just, I don't know if it's a special committee, like to Erik's point, to kind of, expedite things. I know in Miami, you're able to pay for an expedited permit review where you all sit in the room. But it's really about just understanding our approach and being open to that and having a process to expedite these conversations, especially with price changing and everything else. You've got to be able to see where you're at and have some preliminary discussion.
Yeah. Well, I want to close by saying we've had a lot of questions come in. I've kind of fielded most of them. They've been a little pointed, I'd say, on the cities. And I've tried to be delicate with that, but I want to thank you all for coming and doing this with us. And and hope that you will be one of our advocates for the redevelopment of the Cathedral District, and let you know that we have one other big event planned for CDJ, and that is in December. I think it's the 7th of December. Let me double check that. Yeah. It's called Unlocking the Past Through Architecture, and it is a walking tour of the Cathedral District. We have done 2 of these before, and we'll pick up just a ton of people who want to do this. They're attracted to the historic integrity of the architecture that's in the district, with particularly with the 5 landmark churches that are in the district. But it's not just the churches. There are other, like the Morocco Temple is in, and the DuPont building is on the cusp. So the Yates building. So there's a lot of great architecture that is existing. Ted Pappas likes to say that the Cathedral District is the most important neighborhood in downtown for historic preservation and historic landmarks. So that's happening on December 7th. These are all free. So talk it up. And if you were interested in December, we'll get some more information from us coming out soon. Thank you so much for being with us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ginny.
Thank you.
Bye.